So we've got some breaking news right now. Testimony on Capitol Hill from a whistleblower saying that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden directed Border Patrol to cover up very real national security threats due to their wide open border. You're going to hear that testimony, and we're going to expand on it going forward. Plus, well, we've got another breaking story. Justice Department just arrested a man out of Alaska for credible threats against 6 Supreme Court justices. Boy, how do you think he got that idea? We'll remind you exactly who gave him that idea. That story just broke 5 minutes ago, but we've got the latest details on it. Plus, Sunny Hostin on The View, she is, I believe, a hateful racist, and now she's directing that hate to innocent children. And we're going to show you exactly how she did that coming up next. That and a whole lot more. It's a busy morning, and it's developing and getting busier as I speak. So let's get to it. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. Thank you for watching today on our live stream at noon Eastern time. We do this every day, so you should subscribe and get alerts and notices so you can watch us when we go live. And also, I'd love for you to share this video whenever you're watching it, whether it's live or after the fact, because that helps us big time. And another thing that helps us is when you guys leave comments and interact with each other. So I'll start with this. Should I shave? Let me know in the comments section. I'm getting mixed advice on this. I mean, some people think it looks pretty cool, pretty good. I mean, you know, they don't want me to get much fuller than this, but they like this look. Other people, most importantly, my wife wants me to shave. She does have veto power over all y'all, but I would like to hear what you think. Go ahead and leave it in the comments. All right, this just happened about an hour ago on Capitol Hill. Take a look at this testimony about Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Alejandro Mayorkas, and a cover-up about very real national security threats from our unsecure border.
In San Diego, we had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border. Fentanyl is another issue. The San Diego area sees between 80 and 90% of the methamphetamine and fentanyl seizures annually for our entire country. With little enforcement at the border, these drugs were coming through in mass. During my last year in San Diego, the price for a single pill of fentanyl, for example, went from $10 to 25 cents. To make matters worse, during 2022 and 23, I had to shut down San Diego traffic checkpoints, which are critical for drug interdiction, because the resources had been diverted to the process and release mission. The large numbers also had and still have a negative impact on the San Diego community. I had to release illegal aliens by the hundreds each day into communities who could not support them. To quiet the problem, 2 flights a week were provided from San Diego to Texas. These flights simply brought aliens that would have been released in San Diego over to Texas. Each flight cost approximately $150,000. This was the administration's way to try and quiet the border-wide crisis.
All right, now there's more to this testimony, but that's sort of the poll quote blockbuster from this man. As you can see, Aaron Heike, former chief patrol agent for U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, they were told to hide data directly related to encounters with people crossing the border who were on the terror watch list. More details on that in just a moment. They were told to cover up $150,000 worth of flights to fly illegal immigrants to Texas from, it appears, the San Diego area. And they were given no resources to track fentanyl that they knew was crossing the border, and they were told to not say a word about it and shut it up. Again, this is supposed to be a transparent government. This is our government. They work for us. And the only reason to hide that information, because they'll say, oh, well, national security purposes and methods and sources, and we can't let people know this. We got to redact all of that because it has to do with our security. No. Not knowing those details does not endanger our security. Doing what they're doing is what endangers our security. The only reason why they want to redact that information and cover it up and order people to shut their mouths about it is for political purposes. They want to be able to do all of this without you knowing. That's the definition of a political cover-up, and that's exactly what this is. Is anybody surprised? I mean, honestly, anybody surprised? Of course we know this. Of course we know that this is what they've been doing because, frankly, for the last 3.5 years, this very cover-up has been happening right before our very eyes. We've seen the news reports. We've seen the footage. We've seen exactly what's been going on the border since literally the first day of the Biden administration, when with the stroke of a pen, he reversed all of the security procedures that were put in place under his predecessor, Donald Trump, and basically opened up the border along with reinstituting catch and release policies, along with ending the remain in Mexico policies for people who are fraudulently asking for asylum. The net result was chaos, and we've seen the chaos. But whenever any person from this administration responsible for border security was asked, whether under oath or at any sort of press encounter, the cover-up was obvious right before our very eyes. Do we need to remind you?
It is my testimony that the border is secure.
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
We have taken unprecedented action over the past 1.5 years to secure our border.
And we have a process in place to manage migrants at the border. We're working to make sure it's safe and orderly and humane.
The border is closed.
We agree that the border is secure.
We're executing a comprehensive strategy to secure our borders.
One of our highest priorities is to ensure that we have a secure border. And that is what we are doing.
The border is secure.
That, of course, from the RNC in a well-produced ad that hammers it home. We show you that because we lived through that. We saw all of those lies. But the only way you get away with those lies is if you order your subordinates, the people who actually know the truth, if you order them to shut their mouths and cover up the truth. That's how you're confident you can get away with all of those lies. That's the cover-up that was just exposed by Mr. Heike under oath today before the Homeland Security Committee. Let's remind you once again how this was the messaging out of this White House daily as we saw the actual chaos at the border. Watch this one.
Do you believe that right now there's a crisis at the border?
I think that the answer is no. The border is closed. The border is secure.
Is the border more secure under your leadership than when you started?
Congressman, the border is secure. We're executing our plan, and I've been very clear and unequivocal in that regard. Yet we have effectively managed an unprecedented number of non-citizens. The border is secure. The border, we are working to make the border more secure.
Do you continue to maintain that the border is secure?
Yes, and we are working day in and day out to enhance its security, Congressman.
The Secure Defense Act of 2006 says what? That the Secretary of Homeland Security shall take all actions the Secretary determines necessary to achieve and maintain operational control over the entire international land and maritime borders. Will you testify under oath right now? Do we have operational control, yes or no?
Yes, we do.
Chief Ortiz, does DHS have operational control of our entire border?
No, sir.
Bottom line, the actual people who work at the border, whose job, their sworn duty is to enforce our border, will tell you every single day of the week that we do not have a secure border, that we do not have operational control of the border. But the Biden Harris appointees like Alejandro Mayorkas, the ones who are political hacks, they'll lie. They'll lie, and they have lied, and they have continued to lie about the border. And now we know they were actually trying to put pressure on people like Chief Ortiz to also lie, to support their lie and cover up the truth. That's what this testimony from former Chief Border Patrol agent Aaron Heike, that he was ordered by this administration to cover up the details and cover up the facts. Now, what's really remarkable about all of it is that the narrative, the lie, the cover up from the Biden Harris administration that the border is secure was in place and operational, and it was the letter of the law right up until the moment it became politically beneficial for them to admit the truth. That was earlier this year when Joe Biden finally, along with Alejandro Mayorkas, said, oh, we might have a border crisis. But see, the message then, when they changed their tune, was sure. Yeah, we got a border crisis, but it's Trump's fault.
The only reason the border is not secure is Donald Trump and his MAGA Republican friends.
Every executive order this president has issued relating to the border and relating to dealing with the Hispanic community is going to be pulled back. We're not going to be fooling with that.
I don't believe for a second we're the nation that builds walls and whips up hysteria over immigration.
No one will be deported in my administration.
First time ever we've told people they can't come to America. That ends. The cage is closed.
Should undocumented immigrants arrested by local police be turned over to immigration officials?
No. Trump's cruel and humane border policies, remain in Mexico program. I mean, all of this is going to take time, not a long time, but it's going to take, you have to be prepared so we don't create another crisis.
All right, so you can see clip after clip after clip of Joe Biden when he was campaigning, promising to reverse everything that Donald Trump did, because as far as he was concerned, it was evil, it was awful. This is the first time we've ever done this sort of thing. We're turning people away. That's ridiculous. We've been turning away people at our border since our existence. Of course, that's what every nation does. And then, as soon as it became politically expedient, he would say this.
This is the first time.
He would say this.
The only reason the border is not secure is Donald Trump.
Wait a second. What do you mean the border is not secure? You and Alejandro Mayorkas and your border czar, Kamala Harris, just spent the last 3.5 years telling us all that the border was secure. And now, oh, sure, it's not secure, but it's Trump's fault. Now, the most important element of this cover-up that we're learning about now, thanks to this sworn testimony, is the fact that they were told to cover up the fact that terrorists are coming into this country, people on the terror watch list. Let me play that back for you real fast so you can see that part of the testimony, because it's critical. Because frankly, I mean, I don't like to throw this word around much, but this is treason. This is allowing enemies of our country into our nation, knowing that they have plots against us, that they are literally terrorists. These are 9/11 types. And then covering up the fact that those threats are here in this country, which makes innocent Americans vulnerable. It makes them targets. It makes them sitting ducks. And you knew about it, did nothing about it, and covered up the truth about it. I'm no lawyer, but if that's not treason, what is? Once again, just about an hour and a half ago on Capitol Hill.
We had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests.
There you go. Not only have the numbers increased exponentially from the prior administration at the San Diego border, but I was specifically told that I cannot release any of this information. That's a cover-up. There's no nuance here. That's a cover-up. So why do politicians cover up the truth? Well, obviously, they do it because the truth would hurt them politically. But there's also a nuanced part of that, right? Yes, the truth would hurt them politically, but even worse, lying and pretending like the opposite is true helps you politically, right? So when Alejandro Mayorkas and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris spent every day of the first 3 years of the administration saying, don't believe what you see, our border is secure, Maintaining to the American people that we have a secure border helps them. And the truth would not only hurt them, but it would also show them to be liars. Now, let's just pull on that thread one more step, specifically having to do with what you just saw, the terrorist threat. Now, the truth about terrorists coming into this country on their watch because of an unsecure border, that obviously hurts them politically. Lying about it, saying, oh, no, our border is secure and there are no threats from terrorists crossing this border. We don't have to do anything with our border because no American is under threat or terrorist threat with an unsecure border. That obviously is some sort of benefit. So, people who like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, when they hear them say, there's no terrorist threat, we haven't done anything wrong, that's a lie. There's no terrorist threat. That actually improves their position with their base and the American people because, oh, okay, I trust you, everything's fine. You got to cover it up. Otherwise, you're not only shown to be endangering American lives, but you're also shown to be a liar. So knowing that you could be shown to be a liar, you order people to cover up the truth. Why have I just spent a minute and a half telling you the obvious facts behind this? Well, this is why. This is Kamala Harris. This is Kamala Harris confronted with the idea of Donald Trump wanting to secure our border with walls and protections, specifically because of a threat of terrorists crossing our border. What did Kamala Harris say about that?
We don't need to build a wall. And by definition, just plain speak, basic English language definition, it is not an emergency.
You know, he talks about this wall. I always say, let me know how high it is. If it's 25 feet, then I'll invest in the 30-foot ladder.
To suggest that we have to build a wall across our southern border because there are terrorists who are trying to invade the country. It couldn't be farther from the truth.
Couldn't be farther from the truth that we have to protect our border because terrorists are coming across our country. That's what she was on the record saying, and she's never changed the record. She's never corrected her stance on that. So knowing that Kamala Harris, who then became vice president and now is running for president, is on the record saying that it couldn't be farther from the truth that we have terrorists crossing our border, then that makes Mr. Heitke's testimony that much more resonant. It makes it that much more impactful. It shows exactly how vast this cover-up is. Let's watch it one more time.
In San Diego, we had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests.
Bottom line, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Alejandro Mayorkas, and the Biden-Harris administration has made you more vulnerable. They have made our country more dangerous because of their border security policies, their lack of border security policies. They know it. We know it. Everybody knows it. But for the last 3 years, they have commanded the people who work for them to cover it up and keep it quiet, to protect themselves from political vulnerability and to reinforce their lies. If you needed any other reason, if you needed to share information with anybody who might be on the fence about this election coming up, because they don't like how Donald Trump combs his hair and they don't like his tweets, for God's sake, please, I'm begging you, share this video with that person and ask them, how can you defend this? How can you defend this for your own petty personal personality reasons? Why would you vote to maintain not just this vulnerability in our national security, not just putting innocent Americans' lives in danger from a terrorist threat, but to reward this kind of deceitful cover-up? Please get past your own ridiculous personal concerns about Donald Trump's style and just for once vote for competence on our border. Breaking story number 2, and this is like super duper breaking, like 25 minutes ago it hit. Take a look at the press release from the Justice Department out of Alaska. Let's blow it up as big as we can because it's sort of tiny print, but I'll read it for you. Alaska man arrested for threatening U.S. Supreme Court justices and their family members. An Alaska man was arrested yesterday in Anchorage for allegedly threatening to injure and kill 6 U.S. Supreme Court justices and some of their family members. It's maddening here that the actual 6 justices are not named. I don't understand why they wouldn't do that other than for political purposes, but I think we can connect the dots here, can't we? I think we can. According to court documents, between March 10th, 2023 and July 16th, Panos Anastasiou, 76 years old, sent over 465 messages to the Supreme Court through a public website the court maintained. Here's a quote from the indictment. We allege that the defendant made repeated heinous threats to murder and torture Supreme Court justices and their families to retaliate against them for decisions he disagreed with. This is according to Attorney General Merrick Garland. Our justice system depends on the ability of judges to make their decisions based on the law and not on fear. Our democracy depends on the ability of public officials to do their jobs without fearing for their lives or the safety of their families. Beginning on January 4th, Anastasiou's messages allegedly escalated to messages intending to threaten harm toward the victims. The messages contained violent, racist, and homophobic rhetoric, coupled with threats of assassination by torture, hanging, and firearms. All right, our buddy Greg Price also has some details on this indictment, as you can see. Over 400 violent threats against 6 Supreme Court justices. Indictment doesn't say which. He made 82 donations, by the way, to Act Blue, the most recent of which was in July 25. Here's a screenshot of his donations through the Federal Elections Commission. As you can see, Act Blue, Act Blue, Act Blue. Who's Act Blue? Act Blue is a left-wing Democrat donation clearinghouse. This guy is a lefty. He's a liberal. He's an activist for the Democrats. That's where he gives his money. Take a look at some of these messages. This is contained in the indictment. May 17th, 2024. I'm going to call and urge my fellow Vietnam veterans to drive by the Supreme Court justice. They've redacted the name, but drive by blank's house with their AR-15s. And when effing Supreme Court Justice and his effing piece of bleep C-word wife are home, spray the home of these disrespectful MFers with hundreds of rounds, hopefully killing these scumbag C-suckers. Hopefully, N-word Supreme Court Justice number 1, I think we can guess who that is, and his white trailer trash, N-word loving insurrectionist wife are visiting. I think it's clear that the last part of that thread is about Clarence Thomas and his wife, Ginny. This is a left-wing liberal maniac sending these hateful, despicable, racist, violent messages, over 400 of them, to Supreme Court justices. Brazenly, by the way, in an open forum, he's doing this. June 18th, 2024. I don't want to see these 2 corrupt MFers assassinated. I'd like to see them tortured worse than Kim Jong-un would torture his own family. You know, like putting electrodes up their ass and on their balls, needles under their fingernails, pulling their teeth with pliers, etc. Make these scumbags beg for their lives. The most recent message came July 5th, according to this indictment. We should make Supreme Court justices 1 through 6 be afraid, very afraid to leave their home and fear for their lives every day. July 3rd, we need mass assassinations. By the way, this is just 10 days before the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We keep hearing how conservatives and MAGA types are the threat to our nation, threat to our Constitution, threat to our democracy. We keep hearing that they're the violent ones, but look at this. Look at this. Look at who they are. Look at the fever swamp in which they're dwelling. We need mass assassinations. If you're corrupt, you're corrupt. Don't give us this official and unofficial BS. You MFers are unelected, and Americans have no trust in you. The internet is abuzz with Americans clamoring for your assassinations. We need to assassinate you effers and put your heads on a pike and use them as soccer balls. I want to be the first to kick Supreme Court Justice Six's head down Pennsylvania Avenue. You don't want to ask me what I'd like to do to the N-word. And Supreme Court Justice number 2, pleasant, delightful, a donor in good standing for the Democrat Party. All of that included, by the way, in this indictment that was issued today. You can read it online as well. You should read it out online. Everyone should know about this. So how did we get here exactly? You know, we've just spent the last couple of days talking about the violent, divisive, vitriolic rhetoric that we've seen on the national stage, from the President of the United States to the Vice President of the United States to her running mate, talking about how Donald Trump is an existential threat to this country, talking about how Donald Trump needs to be eliminated, talking about how Donald Trump needs to be stopped. And it continues day in and day out. Just 24 hours after this latest assassination attempt in West Palm Beach, Florida, we had people on MSNBC comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, saying that we're going to have jackboot troops goose-stepping down the street if he gets elected, that there will be brown shirts, that children will become part of Trump youth, you know, just like Hitler youth. Get it? We had Karine Jean-Pierre at the press briefing on Tuesday constantly referring to Donald Trump as a threat, a threat, a threat. And when called on it, she says, oh, but you're the problem for questioning me for using language like this, right? They didn't stop. They didn't pause. They didn't take a breath after the latest assassination attempt. And it goes on and on and on. And now we learned this about these threats against the Supreme Court. And I think it's pretty relevant to point out the kind of rhetoric that we've heard from these very same people about the Supreme Court justices. Let's remind you of Chuck Schumer. Just what, 6 years ago, I think it was? Here's Chuck Schumer on the steps in front of the Supreme Court when a decision came down that he didn't like.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
And that was before the Dobbs decision. Naming Gorsuch by name. I wonder if Justice Gorsuch is one of the redacted names from this indictment. I bet he is. Release the whirlwind. You won't know what hit you. I mean, it could be language used by this guy who just got indicted. I just read you some of the things he was saying. Now, that was several years ago. What about more recently? Well, first of all, Kamala Harris, let's not get recent for a second, because around that same time, during the Kavanaugh hearings, Kamala Harris, a then U.S. Senator there from California, decided that the Kavanaugh hearings was going to be her entree into national politics. This was going to launch her presidential career, and she did. She tried to get a ton of headlines during the Kavanaugh hearings, and then just months later, she announced that she was running for president. Now, of course, that crashed and burned and was disastrous, but it did at least put her on the national stage, and it made the case for Joe Biden to select her as vice president. And now, well, here we are. By the way, Kamala Harris learned how to do this from Joe Biden. See, Joe Biden back in the 80s used the Justice Bork confirmation hearings to launch his presidential ambitions. That also crashed and burned back in 88, but he hung in there long enough to finally make it to the White House. So here's Kamala Harris talking about Justice Kavanaugh at the time, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure Justice Kavanaugh is one of those justices who was threatened by this dirtbag today. Well, let's remember how Kamala Harris treated Kavanaugh and how she characterized him at the time.
So the invisible, not so invisible hand of the White House was basically orchestrating, choreographing, curating what the Judiciary Committee would learn about this nominee to serve for a lifetime on the highest court in our land, a court that is supposed to do the work of justice, a court where inscribed in the marble that houses it, we say equal justice under law. It was a sham.
So the confirmation hearing was a sham, she says. And did you hear the language? The hidden hand of the administration orchestrating this. This is conspiracy theory talk. This is fever swamp talk. These are dog whistle buzzwords that resonate with people like this maniac in Alaska sitting in his basement, firing off these threatening, profane messages to Supreme Court justices about torturing them. But this is like mother's milk to people like that. Do you hear the language she's using? The confirmation process was a sham, the hidden hand of the right. This is dark stuff, but it's not kept in the shadows. It's broadcast internationally on mainstream media, and she gets away with it without ever worrying about the ramifications. We're seeing the ramifications today in this indictment. Watch the rest of it.
And when we talk about expecting that people will have a sense of respect for the system of justice, we have to recognize that the process by which he was confirmed has created a crisis of confidence.
They have been dehumanizing these Supreme Court justices since day one, and they have been working overtime to delegitimize the Supreme Court ever since the majority, the last three justices were named by Donald Trump. They have been calling for reforms. They want to stack the court. They've been saying that the Supreme Court is corrupt. They've been saying these justices are corrupt. They've been saying that they should be impeached. They've been saying that they should be term limited out, that the Constitution should be altered, that they should be expanding the number of seats on the Supreme Court to accommodate their desire to stack the court. This is what they've been saying out loud on a daily basis with this drumbeat. No wonder some maniac took their rhetoric and ran with it. I assure you on cable news, you're not hearing this analysis. I assure you on CNN and on MSNBC, and certainly on George Stephanopoulos' and David Muir's ABC News, you won't hear the analysis that I'm giving you. They won't connect these dots. In fact, they may even bury this story and not even talk about it. Why? Because they agree with it. They agree with everything that these people have been saying about the Supreme Court. Let's fast forward now to just 1 month ago. Joe Biden, I believe he thinks he's still president of the United States. He announced sweeping desires to reform the Supreme Court. And what was the rationale for all of these reforms, all of these changes that he wants to put in place at the Supreme Court? He told you the rationale.
In the face of increasing threats to American democratic institutions, I use the Commission's analysis. And today I'm calling for 3 bold reforms.
We're not even going to get into his so-called reforms because they're meaningless, but you heard the rationale for it. Threats to democratic institutions. They keep using that word threat, don't they? They say that this corrupt Supreme Court stacked with corrupt justices put in place by a corrupt hidden hand in the Trump administration are an existential threat to democratic institutions and the basic human rights of every American individual. And then they're going to act shocked that some maniac actually believed them. That's what happened today with this breaking story. That's what you need to know. And yeah, you're not going to get that analysis anywhere else. I've mentioned after the ABC News debate that The View, which is part of ABC News, has quickly become actually the perfect representation of the journalistic integrity of that august institution. If you want to know what ABC News stands for, honestly, don't watch the evening news. Don't watch Good Morning America with George Snuffleupagus. Don't watch their Sunday show this week. Watch The View, because it is part of ABC News. And it perfectly represents who they are. No better than what we saw from Sunny Hostin, one of the members of their panel here. She is race obsessed in the most divisive, angry, hateful way. And we've seen it play out in multiple ways. But what we saw yesterday from her may actually be the worst of the worst. She's examining the story of Patrick Mahomes' wife, Brittany Mahomes. Brittany Mahomes is white. Patrick Mahomes, the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe is biracial. And they have children. And Brittany Mahomes has committed the cardinal sin that anyone in public life can do. She has expressed support for Donald Trump for president. Now, when Patrick Mahomes was asked about this, he said, listen, I don't get into politics. I got friends who are conservative Republicans. I got friends who are liberal Democrats. It doesn't matter to me. I love them for who they are, and I'm not going to remove anyone from my life based on how they vote. Kind of a mature way to approach the world, frankly, and it was refreshing to see. Sunny Hostin was pissed off about that, and she was certainly pissed off that Brittany Mahomes would support Donald Trump. So she decided to talk about it on The View, and well, she crossed a Rubicon here with this analysis. Take a look.
Sir, and that does make me hopeful, actually, that this swift effect will speak to more women about the true character of Donald Trump and will turn them away. But to your initial point, I know you said we weren't going to talk about it, but I was. It just seems to me that since she is in an interracial marriage, she should have known that to support a racist is problematic. Her children are biracial, and her family is one of the families that in the 70s could not have lived in any of Donald Trump's buildings. So it just seems to me that maybe she's just not that politically savvy, or maybe she's just not read in.
Granted,
but it's
all we know is that she liked a Trump post. We don't know. She hasn't stated that she supported him, but that's fair to interpret that she may have, but we don't know that she's a supporter.
Yeah, thank you to Newsbusters for the clip that we're going to watch again and break down here, because that is the most disgusting, despicable, hateful thing that anybody can do, to drag someone's children into this, into her own racist dementia. And try and understand something. This is what the political left does, not just here in America, but look at the history of the last 100 years, whether it's in the Soviet Union or Maoist China or Fidel Castro's Cuba. And yes, I am drawing direct connections between the American political left and those totalitarian, authoritarian, communist countries. They divide children and their parents. That's what they do. And we're seeing it every single day in this country. I mean, if you have children who are in high school or in college, I wonder if you support Donald Trump, how often have you heard from your own children some kind of plea from them? Please, how can you support him? Please, they're told through social media, through TikTok, through Instagram, and they're also told basically by their professors and their high school teachers that you need to confront your own parents on their inherent systemic racism. It's been happening for the last 8-10 years here in this country, but it's been happening, well, for the last 100 years in left-wing authoritarian nations. And that's what she's doing here, this Sunny Hostin. And I want to break it down a little bit more. Let's watch again.
Yeah, that does make me hopeful, actually, that this swift effect will speak to more women about the true character of Donald Trump and will turn them away. But to your...
By the way, let's just stop there for a minute. I don't even know what they're referring to, but it's like, oh, I hope this will speak to who Donald Trump truly is so that women will get the picture. Oh, for God's sake, are you serious? It's been 9 years since Donald Trump came down that escalator. We have heard the constant... These women are still pissed off that the Access Hollywood tape didn't stop Donald Trump. And so every single day, oh, well, maybe this will convince women. Maybe this will convince women. Maybe this will explain to everyone that he's racist. Maybe this will explain to everyone that he's sexist. Maybe this will... I think the message has been heard loud and clear. Here's what you hate to admit, Sunny Hostin. People don't believe you. They think you're wrong. They have their own brains. They've come up with their own opinion that is contrary to yours. It happens. Deal with it. I mean, honestly, is there anyone in this country who doesn't know who Donald Trump is? Is there anyone in this country who doesn't know what Donald Trump thinks? Is there anyone in this country who hasn't heard what Donald Trump has said or done? It's so boring. It's so boring and it's so, frankly, irrelevant. And that's what kills them more than anything else. That they are irrelevant and people don't care what they say. People don't care what they think. All right, so and then this is my favorite part here of this entire video.
Your initial point, I know you said we weren't going to talk about it, but I was. It just seems to me.
I know you said we're not going to talk about it, but I'm going to. And that they weren't going to talk about was the fact that Brittany Mahomes is white and Patrick Mahomes is black. And I guess when Whoopi Goldberg set this topic up, she said, you know, that's not, I guess in Whoopi's mind, it wasn't important or relevant. And maybe Whoopi Goldberg recognizes that it's just so odious and repulsive to make every single issue they talk about race. But Sunny Hostin can't help herself. It's all she's got. So, of course, we're going to talk about the racial aspect of this. But it's not enough. It's not enough to point out that she's white, and apparently that means she's got to think or act a certain way because her husband is black. But it goes beyond that. We've got to talk about their little children. Is there anything more despicable than that? Seriously, anything?
That since she is in an interracial marriage, she should have known that to support a racist is problematic. Her children are biracial, and her family is one of the families that in the 70s could not have lived in any of Donald Trump's buildings. So,
by the way, that's a debunked lie, but it doesn't stop them. It's ABC News after all.
It just seems to me that maybe she's just not that politically savvy, or maybe she's just not read in.
Yeah, she's stupid. See, anyone who supports Donald Trump has got to be stupid. So here's Sunny Hostin using her platform and her microphone and the imprimatur of ABC News to call Brittany Mahomes stupid because of her political positions, trying to divide her with her husband, Patrick Mahomes, and inflict guilt upon her as a mother because in some way she's betraying her own children. But it's funny, I got to guess that maybe Brittany Mahomes, being in an interracial marriage, raising interracial children, maybe Brittany Mahomes is actually thinking like this. Maybe she's saying, you know what? I want my children to transcend race. I want my children to judge each and every individual American, not based on the color of their skin, but based on who they are and their behaviors and their actions and their ethics and their morals, because that's what makes a person who they are, not the color of their skin. In fact, I bet Brittany Mahomes is trying to demonstrate to her children that she wants them to be open and tolerant of people of all races, just like she is with her own husband. But Sunny Hosting, I guess, can't understand that kind of thought process. But there's something going on today about the political left in America and their obsession with the complications of mixed race relationships. Not only did we have that disgusting display on The View, but if you're a liberal, you'll turn right over from ABC to MSNBC when The View is over, and you'll be greeted with this kind of brilliant national security analysis about who will handle Russia better, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Now I know if you're using your brain and logic and your ability to weigh these issues on an intellectual basis, you will say, well, we know what happened under Donald Trump. Under Donald Trump, Europe was convinced by his ambassadors and his Secretary of State to divest from the natural gas pipeline that Russia had installed there, so that they cut off Russia's income delivering natural gas to Europe, thus making Europe less dependent on Russia, thus bringing down the price of gas and oil, thus starving the Russian war machine that is fueled completely on international oil and gas prices. And at the same time, the Trump administration funded Ukraine with weapons so that they could defend themselves against a Russian incursion. And, oh, by the way, I remember Russian insurgents showing up in Syria to lend a hand to that civil war, and American troops killed them overnight, and there were no more Russian incursions into Syria. That's how Trump handled Russia. Now, how did Kamala Harris handle Russia as vice president? Well, they reversed that energy policy, thus fueling and funding the Russian war machine. And then when Russian tanks lined up on the border of Ukraine, they did nothing to stop it and allowed those tanks to roll into Ukraine. And the only thing they had to offer was to give Zelensky asylum, which Zelensky said, no, actually, I'd like to stay and fight. And it was at that moment when Joe Biden, he decided, oh, well, maybe we can make some money on all these weapons and keep this war going in perpetuity. So most people would look at those two records and say, you know what? I think maybe Donald Trump will do better with Russia than Kamala Harris has shown she's done with Joe Biden against Russia. But you'd be wrong, because if you are an analyst for MSNBC, none of that matters. There's only one thing that matters in handling Vladimir Putin in Russia. Let's see what it is.
But Kamala Harris would be just the opposite. Why? Because she's an inspiration. Not only is she positive and does she bring hope and optimism, but as a Black woman, the product of a mixed marriage, she will inspire millions of people throughout the world. Our credibility as a nation, that we would be able to allow, our country is so great that we're allowed a woman like that to become the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States. That is going to send a powerful message all over the world. People like Vladimir Putin are going to say, hey, wait a minute. These guys, they truly have a democratic country. They truly are representative. They truly are fighting for all their people. And Kamala Harris is a manifestation of that.
Wow. That is some high-end intellectual foreign policy analysis that sadly you're not going to get here. I mean, I don't even know why you're watching me right now when you can go to MSNBC and get that. Vladimir Putin will be impressed that Kamala Harris is an inspirational figure who is a product of a mixed marriage, and therefore he'll be kept at bay. That would make a lot of sense. And I would totally buy into it, because clearly this guy is smarter than me. I mean, just look at his tie. Except for one thing that, sadly, I think whoever was hosting the show on MSNBC wasn't smart enough to bring up and interject. But forgive me the opportunity to do that on her behalf. Excuse me, sir, but How does that make any sense considering Barack Obama was also a international inspirational figure who also was the product of a mixed marriage, a mixed racial marriage. And during his time as president, Vladimir Putin literally invaded Ukraine and took the Crimean Peninsula. Can you explain that to me? Could you? You can't? You can't? Okay. Well, seriously, nice tie. You got that going for you. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to throw down with Trump on this whole who's best against Russia thing. You know, what with the record and all. Speaking of Donald Trump, and we have been speaking of Donald Trump quite a bit lately. We're not the only ones. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Did a public forum with Tulsi Gabbard the other day and was asked a question about Donald Trump, about his personality. And let's just be clear, because we do talk about Trump's personality quite a bit here. It's an important issue. I mean, everybody knows where Trump is on policies, and nobody knows where Kamala Harris is on policies. But if you poll the American people right now, policy after policy after policy, Donald Trump wins. He is on the side of the majority of Americans when it comes to pretty much every policy. Abortion is sort of 50-50, and that's a clouded issue. And I don't even know if it's going to compel a lot of people in this election. But on the economy, on national security, on immigration, on crime, on and on and on, and energy policy, Trump wins. And yet it's still a very close election. Why? Well, I think it's because a lot of people vote for president based on their feelings, based on emotions, based on a gut thing, not necessarily on policies. It's the old trope that, you know, you vote for who you want to have a beer with, right? Well, the problem is Donald Trump doesn't drink beer. So now how are we going to do this? Well, let's take a look at this moment when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was asked about Trump on a personal level. And then we'll talk about whether this makes a difference for the way people vote, whether comparing the human being Donald Trump with the human being Kamala Harris will actually work in Trump's favor. Let's watch.
Many years, on 2 occasions, I sued him. Or he was trying to build golf courses up in the New York City reservoir watershed. And I sued him successfully to stop that. And at one point, my wife at that time had been trying to find she wanted to go to Palm Beach for the weekend to see my mom over Easter. And I said, I want to buy tickets for all the kids. And she said, what if I find a free ride? I said, okay.
Oh, well.
I didn't think she was going to do it. But then she said, I found a free ride. And I said, who? And she said, Donald Trump. And I said, I'm suing him. And she said, he told me he knows you're suing him, but it's okay anyway. And we ended up flying down with him, and I had a great time. I still sued him. And, but you know what, after the night that he called me after he got shot and Butler, one of the first things he said to me, he said, you know, are you a religious person? And I said, well, you know, I have a deep belief in God and a spirituality, which is the central organizing force of my life. And he said, you know, I think I believe in that too now.
Now, I love that story about the free ride, and I know he's suing him, but it's okay and all that stuff. That's fun. And Kennedy is an engaging guy when you tell stories like that. But I want to dovetail now off of that last anecdote about Trump's religious belief and his spirituality and sort of, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus moment here after that bullet whizzed past his ear. Because yesterday, in keeping with this theme about Trump as a human being, Trump's personality, he appeared on Gutfeld, the highest rated late night comedy show on television. I like saying that because it pisses Jimmy Kimmel off, because it's true. And he told, well, a similar story. He was asked a lot of questions about this latest assassination attempt and in general, what it's been like since the first one 2 months ago. And watch this.
So if you want to be president, I have a lot of friends that wanted to run they're thinking about maybe not doing it. But here's the only good thing is that it's always a consequential president that gets shot at. And fortunately, so far, I've been very lucky, or something is greater than all of us.
Ooh.
Something is up there. Someone is up there, maybe watching over us.
I think he's voting for you.
Yeah. It's funny. I always thought the most dangerous job was feeding The View. But you bring up God, and you've almost been killed twice. Do you think more about your own mortality and what happens after you move on?
Yeah, not about mortality, but I do think more about God because, okay, Butler was really the greatest of all miracles. If I'm not looking over there, and I mean a full turn, exactly 90 degrees, I wouldn't be here right now. And your ratings would be a little bit lower, perhaps.
Yeah. We have Kilmeade there.
We have to tell the story of how we first met. The ratings over. Remember that one week he just played that thing. But I do think about that because the chart, it was basically an immigration chart. We had our lowest numbers that we've ever had in immigration. And I very rarely use it, maybe 15, 20%. It's always on my left and it's always at the end of a speech. So now I said, bring down the chart right at the very beginning, almost like the first sentence of the speech. Bring down that chart because immigration is such a big thing now with, our country being basically taken over by Venezuela and lots of other people. So
all right, I'm just going to pause this here because there's a couple of things at play, and I just want to give you a quick analysis, and then we'll continue it. And that was, first of all, the spontaneous moment where he just decided to look upwards and talk about how someone else is watching over. And it was a very, very real human moment and an understandable and relatable moment, right? And now he's giving the details about the circumstances under which, instead of that bullet, exploding his skull in front of everyone at that moment and altering the course of history, what led into that moment where instead he happened to turn his head just that way to make the bullet just graze his ear. By the way, as you're hearing this story, I just want you to know there are still lunatics on the left who believe that both assassination attempts have been setups. They're out there. And then these people vote. These people have platforms. They still think that the whole thing was a setup, that it was a fraud, that none of this actually happened. It was all a false flag. It was all this is insane stuff. But it's important to point that out because it was real. It did happen. And what Trump is about to relate to you now, it does require some kind of explanation. And forgive him and most of us to reach the conclusion that that explanation may very well be God's will.
So I said, bring down the chart, and the chart drops down. And I go, look at those numbers. And I look over to the right and ping. And that was not, I knew something was definitely wrong. And it was a mess. I touched, I said, that's unusual.
Remember when you showed it to me?
I showed it.
Yeah, you showed it to me. You said, I know people aren't going to believe this. So Gutfeld, take a look at my ear.
That's right. We met in at the convention.
Yeah.
And I said, who am I going to show it to? We have a lot of guys. They'll say it didn't exist. And I actually did have such confidence in him. And he's really a very special guy, talented guy, good guy, great guy. And I said, if I'm going to show it, let's do it with Gutfeld.
Yes.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
Because it happened right after.
Yeah, how did you get him to see the top of your ear?
Well, I sat in a low chair.
Okay, thank you.
But you know what? It was true. And I took the bandages off very carefully. Yeah. And I showed him. He said, "That's nasty."
Yes,
that was nasty. But
I kind of wanted to touch it, but I knew I would have been tackled.
All right, now I wanted to show you those two clips. First, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. telling this very funny, human, and relatable story about Donald Trump spontaneously, by the way. And then this moment, which also was pretty spontaneous, with a lot of spontaneous interaction there too, about Trump and about, showing him the ear and how did you see it? And I sat in a low chair and all that stuff. This is critically important here for a couple of reasons. And let me explain. As I said moments ago, there's still somewhere anywhere between 11 and 15% of the electorate who claim they are undecided, that claim they don't know who they're going to vote for. And that transcends into the battleground states, the most important battleground states right now. I told you earlier in the week, and go ahead and take a look at the video, that right now Trump is running way ahead of where he was 4 years ago and 8 years ago, mid-September, compared to Election Day. He was like 4 or 5 points behind Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden at this time in those key states, and he ended up either winning those states in 16, some of them in 20, or coming within less than 1 percentage point. Well, right now in those very same states, it's basically a dead heat, right? So his vote is underrepresented, or the pollsters have gotten a lot better. And I don't think that's the case. So he's doing very well right now. But back to that 10 to 15% who still aren't sure. They're still not committed. If you don't know where Donald Trump is on policy right now, I don't know what to tell you. We know what he's going to do. In fact, you've got 4 years in your rearview mirror to look at about what he's going to do. I think if there's hesitancy to vote for Donald Trump, especially considering the fact that his policies are popular, he is on the popular end of policies right now. Okay, then why wouldn't you vote for him, right? And the answer is because of his personality, because of who he is, because of his behaviors, because of his manner of speech, because of his aggressive nature, because, well, the best way to encapsulate all of that is because he's a New Yorker. And, you know, New Yorkers are pretty obnoxious, right? You've met New Yorkers before. And, well, he acts obnoxious sometimes. Now, I know I actually find him funny. I think that it's cool when he does a lot of the things that he does, but we're kidding ourselves if we don't recognize that some people are turned off by his style. Okay, come on. Can we admit that, please? Okay. So what's my point? There's two things at play here that you just saw. Not only very humanizing and likable stories about Donald Trump as a human being that actually shows him to be not just a regular guy, but a pretty funny, socially competent guy who can interact and actually, you know, convey an empathetic message to people. But also specifically sitting for 15 minutes on Gutfeld in this setting, a comedy show, going unscripted, right? And being able to interact with pretty witty people and give and take in the way that he does. Can you imagine Kamala Harris doing that? Can anybody imagine Kamala Harris doing that? Kamala Harris is so scripted. She is so controlled. She is so inauthentic. There's no possible way she could do this and keep up, right? Add to that earlier this week in Flint, Michigan, where Donald Trump chose, instead of giving his typical rally performance where he's got his podium and he's got, you know, proud to be an American blaring on the speakers, God bless the USA, and the teleprompter, and then he goes off teleprompter and he comes back on teleprompter. And what we're used to seeing in rallies, what did they decide to do instead? He sat down and interacted in a conversation with the governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and it was amazing. Say what you will about Donald Trump's political gifts, and it is a gift to be able to stand up there and deliver a speech, go off prompter, go on prompter, do stream of conscious, be funny, engage the audience, and keep people engaged. But even more importantly is to be able to interact with somebody, talk with them, listen to what they have to say, respond to their answers, and then also their questions, and actually sort of show that you can have a conversation. That actually demonstrates to the American voter something much, much more than how you deliver a speech. My understanding from the Trump campaign is that there are at least 2 more interactive events scheduled in the future. One where Tulsi Gabbard will be asking those questions, and the other where Governor Kristi Noem will be asking the questions. They see it too. They recognize that those formats and those settings actually show Donald Trump not just in a good light, but in a different light. Hold on, that's not the Donald Trump I've seen. Hold on, this Donald Trump is likable. This Donald Trump is actually engaging. And most importantly, this is not anything that Kamala Harris will ever do, ever. She is ungenuine. She is inauthentic. She is scripted. She is controlled. She is fake. Donald Trump, even when he says stuff you don't like, even when he's obnoxious, even when he's, completely inappropriate, he's anything but controlled. He's anything but fake and fraudulent. He's anything but scripted. And at the end of the day, that could be the difference maker in an election like this. Because say what you will about Trump, we know what he's going to do, and at least he's not a phony. So all of that happened yesterday. These stories, this interaction, this sort of new turn in the final less than 50 days till Election Day. You see this new approach that could actually lend itself to sort of be the final argument to get those undecideds. We know you're not happy with his behavior. We know you don't like how he tweets. We know all of this, but that's not the entirety of who he is. Look at this Trump and compare it to what you see every day from Kamala Harris. And all of that happened yesterday on the same day that the Teamsters Union basically endorsed Donald Trump. Now, I know the headlines accurately say that the Teamsters Union chose not to endorse a candidate. That's the first time they've done it since 1996, almost 30 years ago. Up until now, every single endorsement has been a Democrat. Before 96, in 92, they endorsed the Democrat. You got to go all the way back to 1988, George Herbert Walker Bush, when the Teamsters endorsed a Republican. And even then, they were really endorsing Ronald Reagan's third term. So to expect the Teamsters leadership to actually endorse Donald Trump, I think is a pretty long shot, right? Not endorsing anyone is such a repudiation to Kamala Harris that it is tantamount to an endorsement of Donald Trump, especially considering the leadership of the union released a poll that showed that their rank and file are supporting Donald Trump on an individual personal basis to the tune of almost 3-1. And what was Kamala Harris's campaign response to that? On the same day that they didn't get the Teamsters nomination, they released this, that 100+ Republican former national security officials endorsed Kamala Harris. Oh, sure, we didn't get the Teamsters endorsement, but we got the guy who used to fetch lattes for Donald Rumsfeld back in the early 2000s. He's on our side. And oh, let's not forget, we've got Dick Cheney too. That's what they've got. If they had anything better yesterday, they would have put it out there. Guys, I know that you're freaking out. I know you're worried. I know that you're looking at the polls every day. I know that you're seeing what people are saying on TV and on your Facebook page or wherever, and you're starting to think, oh God, what are we going to do? Let me just help you out here based on everything I just told you. When you actually objectively, soberly look at what's going on right now, you got to be faithful. You got to be hopeful. You've got to keep your eye on the prize here. Okay? Because based on my analysis, based on what I'm seeing right now, Trump is way better off than he has been in any of his presidential campaigns. Taylor Swift aside, I'm telling you, things are looking very good. Now, that doesn't mean this is a slam dunk. That doesn't mean that anybody should sit back and rest. No. This is going to be a fight every single day between now and Election Day. But we're right now in Pennsylvania, they're already voting. Tomorrow in Virginia, they start voting. Forget about Election Day. It's election season now, and the votes are beginning. And this is when things get intense, and this is when things get serious, and this is when we need to stick together and keep the focus, right? And part of that is sharing these videos. If I say something every day that you find inspirational and hopeful, or maybe even makes you think a second time about the way you're hearing politics analyzed everywhere else, share that video. If you don't want to share the entire show that you're watching right now, go back because every single segment is broken down individually. Find it on whatever platform you're sitting on right now and share that video, either publicly or privately. It doesn't matter. But we've got to get the word out, and we've got to keep people together and focused on where we are right now. Because over here at Town Hall Media, at townhall.com, hotair.com, redstate.com, PJ Media, Twitchy, and Bearing Arms, we're focused. We are ramping up, we are staffing up, and we're ready to see this thing through, right through Election Day. And I hope you're with us, because we got this. We got this. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all the support. And thank you for giving me all your comments about whether I should shave or not. I'll go back and read them. In the meantime, my name is Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.